Hi, my name is Joe Brightman, and welcome back to the Tank at Towson. We're here for our third session today with Dr. Terry Ewell, who is an instructor of bassoon, a professor of bassoon over in the College of Fine Arts and Communications, who also knows quite a bit about open educational resources. Now, open educational resources as a field really stem from the open source software movement, where programs like Google Android, for example, are an operating system which is packaged but customizable to whatever your needs are. So for example, Samsung, Google, and many other cell phone providers can take that software for free and adapt it to their own needs. Now, open educational resources are very similar in the fact that you can find these resources, take them, and use them as you would like within your classroom within certain guidelines. Now, this addresses a major problem in our educational system at this time. As we know, the cost of tuition is constantly rising on our students, and the economy is not inflating as quickly enough to meet the students' needs. So there's a statistic, I'm sorry I don't have the citation with me today, but a colleague of mine had mentioned that it's approaching approximately 50% of students may not be purchasing textbooks for their courses. One of the resources that Dr. Ewell will share with you today is an excellent resource that may substitute for some of those for-purchase textbooks that your students may not be able to afford. And he'll also share a number of software tools as well as other resources that you can find, some of which are subject-specific and some of which can be applied to nearly any subject area. And all of these tools today that we'll be discussing, as we know, are free and cheap. So, at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Terry Ewell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. First, I want to thank Dr. Jane Neapolitan and the staff here at CIOT for all they're doing. I really appreciate that. And in particular, I want to give a plug for the January conferences. I have learned so much as a faculty member attending those conferences that I hope in the future you will attend them as well. It's just really terrific what they're able to offer here at Towson University. In case we don't get to all of the materials during our discussion today, I prepared a website that's at terryewell.com/CIOT. That's capital C, capital I, capital A, capital T, and you're welcome to see this, this PowerPoint on there as well as many other web materials. Joe, you made some interesting comments about the cost of higher education, and I want to just address that first as just a way of discussing the reason why we would use these open educational resources. There have been various studies, and if you look at your PowerPoint, you can see here, on the rise in student debt, and it really is a huge issue for us in university teachings. There is very little that I can do as a university professor to lower student debt in terms of housing, in terms of tuition, car, gas, and all of that. But the one thing I do have control over is the cost of textbooks required in my course and any other software or materials. So I'm hopeful that this will spur our faculty looking at this to help lower the cost for their students. In the last 5 or 6 years, I've saved my students well over $50,000 in costs. And I think it's really important that we address that as faculty members. The first thing I want to talk about is Connections, cnx.org. And this is that website you were talking about that is so wonderful as resources. It's hosted by Rice University. This is a very stable website. I myself have used it for about 6 or 7 years. Many college professors as well as other teachers are posting materials on Connections. So I just want to quickly go through the PowerPoints here. You can see on this opening page they're featuring some textbooks. One's on sociology, another on biology. Some of these are college level, some are high school level. Here's one in statistics and physics. There's just a wealth of information there. This is an example I'm showing right now of what is called a module. The way this is set up is that people contributing to the site create these modules. These are sort of standalone websites. These websites as you can see on this in the upper corner, can then be shared by Facebook or Twitter or other things. The lower circle there, you can see get this page. This means you can download that page as a PDF. So the student, if they don't want to access it by the web, or let's say they're not able to always have an internet connection, they can download that and keep that on their computer. So it can be downloaded as a PDF. You can also see on this page I've underscored something where I include an external link. So there's a lot of flexibility that's very good for instructors here. The next page, we can just see one of the layouts of what they would call a collection. So as a faculty member, you can take any module that's on this website. It's shared through what we call a Creative Commons. That means you can reuse that material, repackage it. So you can put any module in any ordering you want, and a collection is an ordering of those modules. So you can create your whole sequence of readings for your course in order. The students go to the collection. Here's a close-up on that collection here with a table of contents. You can see how I've just arranged them in order in the way I've used in some of my courses here at Towson University. And I just also wanted to show you can include your own materials as well as the materials of others. In this collection, I included many materials by Catherine Jones Schmidt, who's put these music theory materials on that website. So this really is one of my favorite websites, and I hope that first that faculty listening to this will start to understand the use of the collections, maybe save the cost of a textbook through that, but even more, I hope that you will also create modules that can be part of this shared community here. It's really wonderful what we have here. Each of these modules, by the way, is stable there. So as you upgrade versions of the modules, the old ones are still retained by the site, and the new one comes in as the most recent module.
It's pretty amazing. It sounds like a great program. And I've heard of other sources. These were generally pay ones, where you can take out chapters from different textbooks and create your own, and they'll even print them for you. This sounds like a similar option, but you don't have to pay.
That's right. There's no fee for the students. Oh, I forgot to mention that if you have a collection, students can actually order it as a book. So they have a way of self-publishing, just a limited press edition of that book. So whatever you have in your collection, a student can say, I want a hard copy, and it's the entire book can be sent to them as well.
That's great. Do you feel that this would be a sufficient substitute, perhaps, for a textbook instead of a textbook?
I've used it in many of my courses as the substitute for the textbook.
That sounds great. Yeah,
often the textbooks will cost at least $100. When I teach these introductory courses in music theory, frankly, music theory hasn't changed a lot in the last 50 or 60 years. So why should we have to keep reordering a new edition of a textbook when the knowledge has been virtually unchanged? So what's nice is on this site, with other authors and myself, we've put together that, what we want. I order that in the sequence I want for my course, and then it becomes the textbook for the course.
That's great. Now, speaking of textbooks, do you know of any sources where you can, per se, download an entire textbook of your own?
Well, I think on here you saw that in the opening.
Oh, that was in the beginning.
Right, in the beginning there were entire textbooks, and I think if you look at this, you'll also find people have collections. So once I've entered my collection, somebody else can use that same collection. Mm-hmm. Again, this is all shared through Creative Commons. Anyone who authors on this site gives up the right to revenue for themselves. But nevertheless, anybody using the materials there still has to attribute me to the materials.
So you're leading into the concept of Creative Commons, which is one that not everyone may be familiar of. I know there are some ins and outs with Creative Commons and different types of licenses. Could you give our audience a little bit of a description of some of the limitations and some of the doors that Creative Commons licensing opens to you?
Right. Okay. So Creative Commons is I can say a special type of copyrights restriction. If you look at the Creative Commons website, I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but there's links in various places. You have a choice of the type of Creative Commons license you want. The least restrictive one is, I think, called Creative Commons BY, where you have to give the author's name and you have to reference, whatever website they link with that. But there are also Creative Commons licenses that say you may not use it for commercial use, or it must be published only its entirety, so you can't just do a portion of it. There are these different licenses. So if you were interested in using Creative Commons, you could choose the type of license you wanted to use. Now on cnx.org, there is a single license that everybody agrees to. And this is the license where, you know, the material can be used in various formats. It can be chopped up, it can be critiqued, criticized, packaged in books for profit, all of that, but you still have to attribute it to the author.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you submit something to Creative Commons license or apply a Creative Commons license, you do give up some rights to distribute, but at the same time, you're really keeping back the most important ones. You can maintain the integrity of your content by not allowing derivatives of your content, and also you can make sure it's used in places that you'd like, not for profit, or if you're open to profit, you're able to do that as well.
That's right. That's right. Why don't we go on to one of the other of my favorite Creative Commons websites here, archive.org. And this is an amazing site. So this is a website where they're trying to archive virtually anything that's digital. And in addition, they include references to other Creative Commons type sites that are on there. So for instance, one of the projects I use in one of my composition courses or creativity courses here at Towson, the end product is I take a movie trailer that is on this site. I take out all the sound and I ask the students, okay, you've got a 3-minute movie trailer, now create your own soundtrack. So what they'll do is they'll go to a site like this and others, they'll download the sounds of birds tweeting, cars crashing, whatever, gunshots. They'll download music from different things. They'll create their own music. They'll do voiceovers. They'll incorporate all that in the soundtrack that then enhances the sort of production of the movie trailer they're making here. So they have movie trailers on this site, poetry, there's books, there's different things. And one of the interesting things I really like is this thing called the Wayback Machine. This is amazing. What they've tried to do is archive the web, if you can believe that. They've tried to archive, so what they do is they have these web crawlers that go around and they just download the web periodically, and they've tried to archive it as far back as they could. So in some of my courses, for instance, in ethics course I have students look at companies that got into ethical problems with what they put on the web. And I ask them to then do research. Go back to 1997. What happened then? What did their website say? What did it then say in 2000? What did it say in 2003? And so you can do that research on this Wayback Machine.
And from another perspective too, jumping into social networks, I believe that they have everyone's Twitter feeds saved.
Oh, do they? Wow.
Yes. So there are different versions of Twitter feeds even out there. And so in cases if you were to have a dispute where a student said, so-and-so tweeted something and this is something that affects academics and discipline, you can, if that student has deleted the tweet that's in question, you may be even able, depending on the times of when they archived, to pull that actual page, that Twitter feed down out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's more than one application with the Wayback Machine.
They are also archiving software. The idea being, what if you needed a version of Microsoft Word that was 1995 or whatever, or other software. So they've been archiving it for the idea that when this becomes public domain, it can then be open to the whole community.
Yeah, and with regards to software too, I'll mention mine. I'll date myself. When you had told me about this tool, the first thing I did was see if I could find my Turbo Pascal textbook from high school, and it's up there. The entire full text is actually up there. So if I wanted to learn to code in Turbo Pascal like it was 1995, I could do that. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So it really is wonderful what these, I call them creative communities, because it's a joint community that are sharing their different resources, their different ideas, their different artifacts that are then made accessible for us to use in our teaching.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any more resources coming?
Let's see here. We skipped through a few, but let's see what I've got here at the end. Okay, here is some more videos there. Live music, audio is on archive. Texts are on there as well. These are a little more specific to music. I've got some music theory texts websites that people are able to use, where there's a lot of materials for free. And again, this enhances the course that I use, music theory courses.
Very nice. And so looking at these are very, very excellent resources specifically for music theory. I used musictheory.net in a review course on my own as well.
Okay.
Do you have any more examples coming, or ones that are possibly apply to other arts, or may apply to some other areas too?
Well, my own website, I've got toread.net, has resources there that people are certainly welcome to. In the archive.org, they have a lot of links for Creative Commons communities. So you've got art, you've got graphics, you've got everything. I haven't explored it all here as those sort of links, but there really is plenty there that you could see on archive.net.
Yeah.
Archive.org.
Excellent. So moving forward with our presentation, we're moving into an area, as you had mentioned, where we're finding that there are apps in the field of music, as well as many other fields, where the applications on a smartphone or a tablet are actually replacing devices in your home. And so can you tell me a bit about how that's affected music?
Yeah, that's really excellent. A decade ago or so, I would have all my students buy a metronome. So they had to have a physical metronome. They might buy a tuning machine so it could test their intonation. And they had to buy their music. Well, now we're at a point at which if you have a smartphone, you can download an app that will give you clicks, time for your metronome. You can download an app that serves as a tuner to tune their intonation. And then in addition, there is a website for music, imslp.org. It's a tremendous website where music that is now in the public domain, students can download that for free. And much of our repertoire from the classical period, even the Romantic period, is now in the public domain, so it's available for these students now to use.
So much of this has actually moved out to public domain, and so many people are using these resources that you mentioned in the music world, that recently a news article was published this week that the final dedicated sheet music store in New York City closed.
Really?
Yeah, so
wow.
we've moved into this generation of digital print, and these resources exist, like cnx.org, Connections, OpenStax, as we had mentioned. These resources exist in all areas, so they're open to everybody.
Yes.
To jump off this idea too, I know that you are also aware of some software that is totally free that can be used to replace some of, and this is back about a dozen slides. We skipped over.
Yes, we did. I can go back there. Yeah, there's some software that is free for my students, and that I do use in my music courses that I can certainly make. So Finale is a company that is one of the industry leaders for what you would say music editing software online, or on the computer, digital sort of editing of music. And they offer a free product called Finale Notepad. So in many of my courses, I have the students download this free app, which they keep on their computer, and they can create assignments here. They can then send the PDFs to me. They can send the music, or they can also send a recording. I wouldn't call it a recording, but a sound production of the file in some form to me as well. So this has been very helpful in my work in music. In addition, Aria Maestosa is a great MIDI editor. Now, MIDI is a music interface, digital instrument is technically what it means, but if you played the old games, the arcade games, and if you many of the generated computer sounds are with MIDI sounds.
I recall, if and I think many of us do in the Web 1.0 days, when you go to a website and
yes,
the animated
absolutely,
GIFs,
yes,
all MIDI files.
Oh, those are all MIDI files. The nice thing about the MIDI files is they're very small, very portable. So at that time, 10 years ago, that was the way to transmit the music. Now we've got more broadband space, so you can have the MP3 files, OGG, even WAV files are now available for transmission over the lines. But this Aria Maestosa is a great manipulator of music, And so I use that in my creative classes here at Towson University. It doesn't cost my students anything at this point. It's a tool they use. Another tool I use for recording and technology is Reaper. Now this is one where the students, it stays open, but the student should purchase a student fee, which is a lower fee product for that. But there are other, Audacity is a very common one that people use for editing sound waves and sound files and things like that. So it's really wonderful. I feel so fortunate to be an age where my students, just by having a computer, have access to all of these programs, all of this information, all of this knowledge, and I intend to make use of it.
Absolutely, and it goes back to a topic we mentioned last time with Matt Durrington, that these programs, such as GIMP, Aria Maestosa, we'll get to GIMP in a moment, and a lot of the other software that is free, and some of these even come on computers, that they liberate each of their arts, and they make these available and creatable by the average person. You no longer have to have a doctorate in music theory to create a song.
Yes.
Now, you do need a doctorate in music theory to truly compose a song, we know that, but at the same time, on a casual sense, people can still engage themselves in creativity. A lot of the software that's coming out too, as you see on the slide that's up now, and you'll tell us about in a moment, these are replacements for some very, very expensive suites of software.
Right.
So
Right. For instance, GIMP is a great digital image manipulator, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, it's essentially
sort of like a Photoshop for free.
Exactly.
It's an open source type of software, and so I use that exclusively. As a university professor, I can't afford all the upgrades for all the software myself, let alone can I expect my students to be able to. And one point I want to add here, Joe, is that I think as a professor it's important that I give tools to my students and I demonstrate how to use the very tools that they can then use when they graduate from here. If I'm requiring my students to use tools that are too expensive for them to use when they graduate, then it's not going to be effective for them. That's why I really believe in using these open educational resources that are available. I want to talk about one thing. Many of the professors tell me that, the students nowadays are so technologically savvy, much more than the professors. But, what I found is our students are savvy as consumers, but they are not savvy as producers. And I find that many of my students, they don't know how to manage their files well. They don't always back up their files. And I have this rule of two for my courses. You've got to have 2 ways to access the materials. You've got to have 2 ways to produce the materials. You've got to have backups for all of that. It's this rule of 2 because technology will break down at some point. So you always need a backup. But my students, they don't know how to create with technology. And so by requiring these different tools, they begin to understand how to create it. And then they don't know how to share it. You'd be surprised when you get a file that's a little bit large, they have no idea. I can't send it as email attachment. I can't put it on Facebook, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's why one of these resources, Dropbox, is so important. Or Google Cloudware, or some of these other forums. So if I, as a faculty member, am demonstrating to students these sort of resources that they will then be educated with when they graduate here, I think they're better for the job market. They're ready for the job market.
Yeah, and it's really great to have an alternative moving into the job market because a lot of these standard tools, for example, Adobe Suite, Office Suite, the full professional version, and AutoCAD software can be amazingly expensive. The software companies want students to use it.
Yes, they do. They want that monthly fee now. I think it's all available as Cloudware, isn't it now? But you pay that monthly fee, and that accrues over time.
And they're more or less, by learning that at the university level, they're obligated to stick with it. That's the system that they know. But being able to teach students alternate ways to achieve those same, using your two-way rule, so to speak, teaching alternate ways to achieve the same goals using different software allows them to not only bring a little bit of themselves to the table, but save a whole lot of money in the process.
Right.
So thanks.
Right. Absolutely agree with that. We were talking a little bit earlier, if we have time, about the difference between fair use and Creative Commons. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. Fair use is what's allowed for in the academic setting or a teaching setting for a teacher to use material that is copyrighted, that is protected. And there are a number of different guidelines for that. It's not a black and white thing. It's more, consider it like a continuum. On one end, it's clearly not fair use what you're doing. On the other end, it clearly is fair use. And some of the criteria are you using for profit? Are you using just a fraction of it, a portion of it, not the entirety of whatever that is? Is it something that is used in an educational setting? So those are sort of the things. So what I so much like about Creative Commons is I don't have to worry about copyright or even fair use law, because if it's on Creative Commons, it's available for me to use in the educational situation.
Absolutely. And one thing to always keep in mind with fair use is that although we talk about best practices and guidelines for fair use, all educators should keep in mind that fair use is a defensible position in court, and that makes it the gray area that you talked about,
right,
rather than a standard set of rules of what we can and can't do. The way that the U.S. judicial system determines what we can and can't do is by someone having a copyright claim and making that against someone, and then the court process evolving and the defendant using fair use as their defense, using the 4 qualifications you mentioned. So it's something that we have to, it's a ball that we have in our court, but we have to use carefully and very respectfully of copyright holders and the original creators of those materials. So it's there, but as you mentioned, it's still a very gray area, and it's a gray area that's worth exploring, I believe.
Indeed.
So,
thank you. Yeah.
So I guess I have one question for you. If you finish with most of your slides, we have a few questions that we ask as standards throughout our sessions. And so the first one I'd like to ask is, have you heard any reactions from your students specifically? Have you heard big thank yous for using these free resources? Has it made anybody's education possible?
Well, it was one of my bassoon students. Is a minor in bassoon, and he is working, I think it's on architecture or city planning or something, urban planning, I think is his degree. And he came back to me all excited just a couple of months ago, because I had required in one of my pedagogy classes that they create videos. And they use they can even use their laptop and create the video and things. So he had used the video, and he had gone to a job interview and had shown this to his potential employer, who was so blown away and impressed that he could create a video that he was hired. Now, his job wasn't with video creation, but it involved technology, and the fact that he showed he could use some of these tools was very helpful for him.
Yeah.
So I was just so pleased to hear that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the more tools, I feel, although we don't want to switch to teaching technology as an objective, the more tools that we can learn in our field, the more hireable people are. There's an expectation that people will have some familiarity with technology, I believe, when we get into the workforce. And although there are plenty of positions that you can get without varied experience in technology, it seems that that's always a plus to have in your corner. So that's great.
And the tools are becoming so much easier to use. They really are. If you go back 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to create the 200 videos I've created. I'd need to have like a TV studio, the cost of the cameras, the cost of the equipment, everything, let alone the bandwidth wasn't even available at that time for this sort of thing. So it's really remarkable. In a way, it's not the tools the problem, it's that we just have to take the time to acquaint ourselves with these tools and begin to use them and see the potential in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned, too, that things are becoming easier to learn.
Yes.
One of the questions we always ask is, how can faculty get started in creating open educational resources or finding their own? What are those first few steps that they can take to get involved with this open educational resource movement?
Well, I did push cnx.org, connections.org, because it's also called OpenStax, as you made mention. This is a place where they've got a simple sort of a text editor on the screen. You register as a teacher or instructor on there, and you create your first module. And I think that would be an excellent way if we could just get a number of us, just to even create one module that adds to the community there. You know, as teachers, we all have an area of expertise, something we can share, or we wouldn't have been hired as professionals. So putting that area of expertise, putting that knowledge in a brief, it doesn't even have to be long. Some of these are just a paragraph or two in a module online can be a great first step.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So as we move into our next section, I'll ask another question to you in a moment, just to give our audience some time to generate their own questions. We'd like to move into the think tank portion of our show. Now, in this section, we'd like really to hear from as many of our audience members as possible. And our goal here is to create a healthy conversation where we're recommending ideas, relating Dr. Ewell's experiences and the resources that he's shared with us to our own courses, our own classes, and our own work situations, in the hopes that we'll actually be able to use these in the future. So as I go through our next few questions with Dr. Ewell, if you'd like to participate, and there's a hand raise icon, please click that if you'd like to ask your question verbally, or you can use the Q&A box that's just above the media viewer in the right-hand menu. Either one of those are good ways to get through with us. So Dr. Ewell, one more question that I always like to ask is, in the future, how do you see yourself participating in the OER movement and generating more resources? Do you have any big plans or great ideas for what you'd like to do next with this concept?
I do, and it's in some ways it's hard for me. I dream about it. My expertise is such that I use consumer level type products and things that are available. So I'm not going to be able to code. I don't have the time to do that and things. But I dream of the time where the materials I've created could be interactive. For instance, I've created some 200 videos, and they deal with certain excerpts or certain studies. I'd love it to be that instead of the student just viewing the video, that the student could play what they're doing in their, in that particular line of music, stop, and then ask for my comments interactively that have already been shared online. Like it would zip through the portion in the video that would comment on that, or it would hear, oh, this common intonational mistake they made, so it would then go to the portion where I talk about intonation or fingerings or something like that. I'm just waiting for that, and then of course further out would be the virtual professor. I call myself a digital professor, but I want to be now an interactive digital professor, and then going on to just simply that virtual thing that you'd see on Star Trek, on the holodeck or something like that.
That would be unbelievable.
Yeah, wouldn't it? But I have to wait for there to be some sort of commercial software that will do that. Now, we were actually talking about smart music.
Yes.
So they have some software where a student will play and the accompaniment will track with them, slow up or speed down, and be in sync. So there is now some interactive software. But I think it would be just so great if it could be interactive, where it would be almost like being there in a lesson.
Yeah.
With me for the people that can't. I have students in China and Bolivia and Mexico, and I get emails around the world, thank you for these videos, but wouldn't it be even better if there was sort of this interaction with them?
So it sounds like you need an artificial intelligence system behind.
I think so, yeah.
Those systems. And this sounds very, very similar. Smart Music is one that's very music specific. They also have a lot of reading and writing analysis programs and even math analysis programs that adjust to the student level. For example, you take a math examination, it would know a certain portion of it would know what you had done wrong in your calculations in a mathematical problem and be able to identify the step where your calculations went off. Right. Then go back, give you a lesson to review just that section. Perhaps it's a formula or a concept, and then retest you afterwards to see if you've achieved it and you move forward. Smart Music does that same thing in music, and it sounds like your plans are going to be a very large version of those. So that would
be wonderful if it ever comes about.
Yeah. We do have a question from one of our teammates today. Someone in our audience would like to know specifically, how do you use your read.net site to support your own instructional practice?
On toread.net, I have various papers that I published, so they're available there. For instance, I have a number of papers on making bassoon reeds. It's something that's very common in America. We would make our own bassoon reeds. I also have access to the many videos that I've made. On 2read.net, there are more materials than available on YouTube. For instance, I have some videos on Baroque ornamentation, and I include some PDFs of exercises that the students could do along with the videos. So all of that is there. In addition, the thing I like about 2read.net is I have some transcripts on there that you can then use Google Translate. So by putting the transcripts on a web page, then somebody who is not, English is not their first language, they can then make a quick machine translation of those. Got materials on there in Mandarin as well as Korean as well as English as well.
So this is something that can make a serious impact to student success when there may be a barrier that as an instructor, we may not always have the skills. Some of us do have the skills to overcome language barriers and many of those other barriers, right, because we speak those languages. But in the cases where we don't, we can use tools like the ones you just described to support us and to help communicate better and to bring those materials to the student the way that they need them, really, right, rather than the way that we present them. So we do have another question coming up, and this one is from our Assistant Provost, Dr. Jane Neapolitan. She's with our Office of Academic Innovation. She'd like to know, we have a wide variety of student levels of achievement, and aptitude is the word that we would use in the music world. And so how would you manage or address the variability in the students' skill sets as they go to produce these works? We get a very, very varied set, so to speak, of abilities in a class list.
Right.
How would you use these same tools to help that diverse population?
Yeah, well, in the courses I teach, which are general education courses online, I have that diversity you're talking about. It's interesting, when I started teaching online about 7 or 8 years ago, the student population that would take my course were pretty much self-selecting. There was a trepidation of anybody taking things online that didn't have sort of a tech savvy to it. And now I find the students are very different. And what I talked about is I do have to teach some of the basics. I have online, I talk about saving files in multiple locations. I talk about some of the basics that they need to know. I have to include materials on how do you do a screen capture? How do you copy files? Those sort of things. So I've included some materials online. Naturally, if the student is having a lot of difficulty, then they come see me at office hour. And we do occasionally have some software, hardware issues. But for the most part, despite different platforms, the software I use is multi-platform. That's another thing, very important, that it be available on multiple platforms.
Of course,
Yeah.
at this point, since Mac is definitely on the rise in user base. So it sounds like your approach is really a bit of anticipation.
Yes, you have to be ready for that, absolutely.
Yeah, and then in the case that there's anticipating the upcoming problems does not work, you also have some reactive supports ready. So it's, you kind of have to play it as it goes. We have one who's also coming from an anonymous, actually it's coming from our manager, Latanya Dyer from the Office of Academic Innovation as well. And her question is, has using these resources helped your workload at all?
Interesting, help my workload.
Has it reduced it? Do you feel like it increases it?
Okay, let me put it this way. Teaching online courses, oddly enough, I do all my teaching before the course even starts. So the nice thing about teaching in this fashion is when I have downtime, summer, I'm developing all of my teaching materials. So I can work during hours of my own choosing when I have that time. When the courses start, I'm not teaching in the sense that I'm developing and delivering my materials. They're already there. In fact, my courses are already completed from day one. Students have access to all of those materials from day one. So they have a sense that first week before they sign the dotted line, as it were, before they truly are a member of the course, they can look at the whole course survey and say, yes, I want to, or no, I don't. Okay. But in terms of reduced load, I'd say the load ahead of time is quite substantial. And the learning curve can be quite substantial. When the course is going on, I'm more of an administrator, manager, counselor, those sort of things. So I don't have the teaching load, I just have the other activities, the grading, all of that that's part of the course.
So really, the way it sounds to me that this impacts your workload is that it doesn't necessarily, it may not be an increase or a decrease overall,
Right.
but it shifts to the beginning.
It's a big shift, that's right.
And then throughout the course, you'll be able to work more with the subjects that you like to, where you interact with students and give students the assistance that they need in a personalized context.
Right.
We only have a few minutes left, so before we go today, I'd like to see, are there any other points from your presentation that you would like to touch on that we didn't get to today?
Well, one of the, just to follow up on the last question we had there, one issue with teaching an online course is you have to keep updating the materials. So I try to update at least 10 to 20% of the course. I'll look for the oldest ones. And when I started teaching online, frankly, the bandwidth was such you could only have just a small screen video. That was all that was allowed. But now those look very antiquated in the resolution, so you have to have larger graphics. And so I have to keep updating those materials as we go along. So that's an important thing. Is you're going to teach online, you can't just develop your materials once and for all and expect it to be current for a decade. That's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good practice for courses that don't involve technology as
True
well,
enough.
keeping things moving forward. So it's something that we had to do anyway. So it's really great. First, I'd like to say thank you, Dr.
Thank
Yule.
you.
This was a really great presentation, and I hope it's very helpful to our faculty and our guests from the USM system who are with us today. Is there anybody that you'd like to thank before we wrap up today as well?
Well, again, I want to thank the staff at CIOT. Thank you, Joe, for reaching out, and just want to encourage our viewers to become involved in those creative communities.
Yeah, and so from the OAI team, I'd like to send our thanks to Dr. Jane Neapolitan, our Assistant Provost, Latanya Dyer, our Manager for Office of Academic Innovation, David Marino, who is our videographer for these sessions, and all of our support team, including Tammy Adams, Tiffany Henley, and Audrey Cutler back in OAI. So, for one more time, I'd like to say thank you as well to the audience, because you are the folks who really can bring the ideas to the table here. So thank you for your time, and that's all for this week on the Tank at Towson.